Well, the backlogs in Durban, which is one of the busiest ports in Africa, have so far cost Transnet over 160 million rand in lost revenue. For more on this, let's speak to Transnet National Port Authority Managing Executive responsible for Richards Bay and Durban, Moshe Motlohi. A very good evening to you, sir. Good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time on News at Prime. So the freight industry, I don't know if you were able to hear a short time ago, is putting the blame for this crisis squarely at your door. Do you accept responsibility?
Good evening, Thembekile. Thanks for having us. Yes, Thembekile, we regret the situation we're finding ourselves in. We are responsible for the ports in terms of being authority and our sister division operations. It only becomes fair for us to accept where we've had missteps as the organization.
But it's more than a misstep if so many ships are waiting at sea and we've seen dozens of trucks queuing with nothing to load. It's more than a misstep.
Thembekile, we note, let me first also give an update. On your introduction, you were mentioning 70,000 containers. The containers that are at sea is 35. It does not make it any better, but the number is 35,000 instead of 70. Secondly, seeing the problem that we're faced with, we have now gotten to where the authority, National Ports Authority, has stepped in to say to terminal operator, we need a performance improvement plan. This is informed by getting clear deliverables every day, which is something that is done out of the ordinary. It's not like an ordinary occurrence. We are looking at those. Since we have started this intervention, we've seen on Monday we had 61 vessels outside in the Port of Durban. Yesterday, the number came down to 59. This morning, the number has come down to 56. And we are trying to push hard that this number gets better every day. We also have been putting in place pressure on the equipment availability from the terminal operator, where they have worked with the OEMs, sending some technicians to help them. We have seen results immediately, where today 8 straddle carriers were brought back into operation. I've learned that 3 of them have since come out, but 5 straddle carriers that we were yesterday. So we feel that the intervention that we put in place, working with stakeholders, including customers, is beginning to pay results. Critical to it as well, Thembekile, is that we have reached out to our employees to make sure that every port is being mobilized around rescuing the situation, because it has to turn.
It has to turn. And you say you've made some progress, no longer 70,000 containers waiting, but 35,000 is still a lot. Does that mean that the estimate that it may take up to February to deal with this whole crisis still stands?
Look, Thembekile, we take this on week-by-week basis, because what we're doing, we're ramping up the throughput per day. We are stretching our teams. Every day we bring in back new equipment. From where we're handling 3,500 containers, we stretch it to 4,000. And from there, as soon as more equipment gets into the system, we have to adjust the targets that they have put in. So we're chasing to have this at a reasonable shorter period, but it's difficult for me to tell you now. But we're doing everything we can to make sure that we recover from this setback.
So is February still the estimated time? I know you can't give an exact date, but are you still expecting that it'll take you up to February to make sure that you've resolved all of this?
Look, it is safe to say that, Thembekile, but we're putting pressure on the system to get a much better date than that.
What many people are struggling with, Moshe, is why it is that your systems were allowed to deteriorate, collapse really, to an extent where, as we sit here tonight, you're sitting with 35,000 containers, dozens of vessels at sea. Who takes responsibility? And by that I mean not just an apology and admitting that it's your fault, but who then falls on their sword, if they have to, for the creation of this crisis?
Look, the shareholder in the new Transnet board has stepped in, and as you would know, that they have already started hitting the ground running, where they're demanding answers and getting us to do what we have to do as the organization. And we have mobilized resources within to make sure that we bring the best we can forward so that we can turn the situation around.
Why was there a failure to get ahead of this crisis? Why did it have to come to this?
Typically, there could be a number of issues, because it's not a single dimension problem that we face with. One, there has been, since COVID, where the level of investment was not in line with what ought to have happened. And now that we're starting to buy these things, we really have realized that these are long-linked items. You place orders, but you are not going to get them within the shortest period of time. And we have now reached out to stakeholders to say, hang on, what can we do? Where we've started looking at the second-hand equipment, working with shipping lines, they're helping us to identify some which will be brought into the operation. We also now are saying, let's change the operating model where we can so that we can adapt to the existing challenges and make sure that we recover quickly out of this situation.
And Moshe, are the people who were supposed to have made those calls much sooner than now, are they still in the employ of Transnet? And if so, why?
Look, the decision that we made were informed by the prevailing conditions back then. And it's going to be difficult for me to say, who do you pin this up to? What we are looking at this level where I am at is to make sure that the port functions in line with the commitment that each of the operators has signed with the authority. And it's just to state my role. My role is that of a landlord, where I do not handle the cargo as my division, but we demand results from those who work for us. We've been engaging various terminals who are not performing. You would remember some stage we shut down an operation in Richards Bay, where when we see things are getting off track, we really focus at it. We have learned out of that that one of the areas that we needed to focus on was on the maintenance side when we do oversight, instead of just focusing on other issues which were mostly operational in nature or environmental. But we have now drilled down one level to say we have to look at frequency of maintaining of the equipment. What percentage of their revenues go toward maintenance? And we believe doing this is going to unearth problems where people are cutting corners.
Would you agree, I know you said you're just the landlord, as landlord then, would you agree that this is a crisis to the point where ultimately the people who slept on the job, for want of a better phrase, should not have a future within Transnet, because ultimately this is costing not just Transnet, but businesses and possibly even consumers further down the line a lot of money?
Yes, the situation is costing the economy a lot of money. We're alive to that and we want to change it. And we are clear in terms of how we are, that people must be held accountable. That is why we have now said this performance improvement plan has got a person's name next to it and say people who do not shape up have to be dealt with accordingly. And that this is the space we're in as the authority to demand those answers. And also we have started something else to say, as we do this oversight, what could be the next step when the terminal operators are not performing? Therefore, we're putting processes in place that will ensure that we can fully leverage on what the legislation expects of us, of demanding performance, and where possible, if we have to revoke licenses, do so. But we're putting the processes in place to deal with that.
What are those processes going forward?
Look, the process first, you sit with the non-performing operator as an authority. There's something called Port Oversight Committee, where everyone is assessed against the made on the license. If they are not meeting the threshold, you have conversation and demand improvement plan. If the plan does not deliver, you write a letter to them raising concerns, and you start having administrative hearings, which we have started with others. From there, this could culminate to where the license is suspended. But when you do that, you do not want to suspend the license without really having an option and say you suspend, then what? So we're putting in place a process of listing companies that would have capabilities to run institutions that would be failing to perform, so that we can use those levers to step in and get somebody else to rescue the situation. We are at the stage of going to market to call for the companies that will be on our framework list, so that if we need a particular skill set, we can go source it from there and deploy it to help the economy to continue.
But are those processes, because I know that some of them can be quite bureaucratic, are they agile and fast enough to keep up with the magnitude, the scale of the problem, from the various parts that require maintenance to the systematic issues that basically need to be brought up to speed with the day and time that we live in currently?
Typically, we're doing the best we can. I can indicate to you that when we had a similar situation where there were deviations on the environmental side, we were agile and quickly moved into intervene in that instance. Right now, we've set up a team as an authority that goes around all the facilities in our ports to look at the conditions of their equipment so that we can also hold them accountable if there are any deviations. Okay. And hence, parallel to it, we're putting these pressures. We're at an advanced stage of getting it. Once we have it, we would have developed enough information as things are right now to say we have done everything we could, we have assisted, but you are not responding. Therefore, let's get into some, if you like, if these were municipalities and say you put them under administration. Right now, we're working with everyone, terminal operators, shipping lines, customers, our employees to say how do we salvage the situation in the interest of the country.
And just in the simplest terms then, put in context the sort of work that needs to be done, basically why it is that the problem is taking so long to resolve and what needs to happen daily at port level to make sure that we're seeing more and more of those thousands of containers begin to move out onto trucks and to their ultimate destinations.
The process that I referred to, the performance improvement plan, is chaired by me every day, 7:30 in the morning for an hour, where I get feedback from the ports that are affected. In this case, we've extended this to cover Eastern Cape ports and Western Cape, where we've got 9 streams that we're focusing on, starting with how many pieces of equipment are deployed and how many should be there in place. Hence, we're able this morning to understand that they needed to bring the straddles that they brought back, and they did. And we also have shared ideas of how they needed to put each of these equipment on a project management plan where you list the spares that you require and look at what you need to do. TPT has gotten into an arrangement with their OEMs where technicians from ZPMC are landing tomorrow. They've sent some already from local to go and assist. Hence, you've seen this returning to work. We're looking at the number of teams they have. And again, we're demanding to see what is the recruitment pipeline. When should we expect people to come in? The reliability of equipment, like I was mentioning, they brought in 8, 3 failed. They must explain what went wrong. Why would we have 3 failing when they've just come back? So we really are having a short cycle management system where we want to look at the drivers of non-performance. And we also are keeping the morale of our employees up to say things that do not require money, like your shift change. Those should be done promptly, and we need to make sure that everyone is mobilized around one message, the true north of saying, let the port system work.
It sounds like a mess, doesn't it?
Yes, it has been a mess, but this is the mess that we say out of it there are opportunities, and we're taking the opportunities like of collaborating with others, bringing the best skills you can in the system and making sure that you are resilient and we are able to recover from this. And the signs are there already.
Moshe Motlohi, good to speak to you. Transnet's National Port Authority Managing Executive, responsible for the Richards Bay and Durban areas. Thank you.